All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Jesse Randall. I am the CEO and founder of Sweater, and Sweater is the host of Founder Saga. Sweater's purpose is really to open up the venture capital asset class to the world at large so that anyone can put money into the VC category right along with all the big boys that are out there. And we're making exciting progress, but like with anything with the SEC and fintech related, we have a slow slog in front of us. So in the meantime, we decided to create Founder Saga and interview awesome people like Paul Allen to come in here and tell their stories about how they found success and have created value in the world through entrepreneurship. So Paul, welcome. Excited to have you.
Thanks, Jesse. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that we're going to be tackling with you today. I mean, one is Ancestry. It's fun that you pulled out your vintage Ancestry polo. I got to ask, how old is the shirt? You've had to have
it is, it's 22 years old, and I don't think I've worn it for 20 years. So I've totally outgrown it. It doesn't fit. If I was in public, I would never wear it because I think I've outgrown it is what I should have said. But yeah, it's memorabilia that I really value. I can't throw away any old shirts. This shirt, if you can see it, is JP Interactive. And that was the name of John Pastana and Josh James's interactive agency when we hired them to build the Ancestry homepage, to do kind of the first professional design on our Ancestry homepage. And I can't throw away this shirt. I might be the only person in the world that has a JP Interactive t-shirt or golf shirt. And I'm really proud of it. Maybe someday it'll make its way into a quilt. But I literally can't throw away all of these 90s internet era pieces of apparel.
Oh my gosh, I love it. That's so awesome. So did that go on to be what was Josh
They
James's
went from
agency
JP
that he had sold?
Interactive, they went to Superstats, and then they changed their name to mycomputer.com, and then they fired all their small business clients and became Omniture, and then sold for $1.8 billion. And then Josh went on to found Domo, which is now worth about $1.8 billion. And John is running Observe Point. So, but to know, just to realize that Ancestry hired these two before they did any of their own kind of scalable ventures. And so we've been friends for like 23 years.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Omniture is the thing of legends in Utah. That's awesome. All right, well, let's jump back to Ancestry then. Okay, so give us the quick background. I mean, we've got Ancestry. We've also got SOAR that we're talking about. So give us the quick rundown, however you want to present your time at Ancestry and how that started and where you're at today.
So Ancestry really started kind of the genesis of it was 1990 when my best friend and I started a CD-ROM publishing company. And our mission was to put all the best books ever written in every field onto CD-ROM using a powerful search engine called Folio that my brother and my brother-in-law had started that company in the 80s. And so we weren't inventing technology per se. We were just saying, what content do people value and what content is important? Let's build libraries of these content sets that could be sold, and people in their own home can have a massive internet search, or not internet. This was years before the internet. A CD-ROM searching library of all the content that mattered. So we went and turned it into a $4 million a year company in 5 years. But it was hard to get copyright clearance and permissions from authors and publishers. And I had started a master's degree in library science. So I spent a lot of time in libraries, and it just the light bulb turned on that all the world's historical and genealogical information, the older it is, the more freely available it is. It's in the public domain. So all of those genealogical collections that I spent tons of time with, we did publish a CD-ROM in genealogy in 1995 and made $1 million in just 5 months. And it was a regional kind of Latter-day Saint genealogy product. Then I went to an internet conference in September of 1995 in San Francisco, and I have the t-shirt for that as well. Online Developers 2, September 17th to 19th, 1995. And it was at that conference that it hit me that, number one, the internet was going to replace CD-ROM as the primary place to store data. And number two, all the world's genealogical records could be put on the internet because they're in the public domain. And so I came back to Utah and kind of started down that path. We launched Ancestry's website in June of '96. Then we spun it out as a separate company in July of 97, incorporated it in Delaware, and went on to raise, $90 million of venture capital over the next 3 years.
That's fantastic. Okay. So, I mean, 95, this is like the whole beginning of the internet here. I mean, I just watched a clip like 3 days ago showing, I think it was Good Morning America hosts saying, what is this internet thing? And I think it was 1995.
Yeah, I've seen that clip too. 1994, Mark Andreessen released the Mosaic web browser. It was either 94 or late 93. And I started using the browser, but there wasn't a lot to connect to in 93 and 94.
Right.
So 95, yeah, was kind of the beginning. I think Amazon was founded in either 95 or 96.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
so,
right.
so we were right about that time. I mean, the ideas started hitting entrepreneurs all over. And pretty soon, everyone had a .com business plan, and pretty soon everyone could get funding. The cool thing for us was we got cash flow positive before we raised any outside funding. We
That is
had
incredible.
a
Yeah.
really successful subscription business model by the middle of 1998. We had tens of thousands of paying customers, and we were cash flow positive before we took outside money. And if I
That's amazing.
knew then what I know now, I don't think we would have taken outside capital. I think we would have just been patient and grown that thing into, a wonderful company, not necessarily run or led by VCs.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to give context a little bit more to Ancestry and make sure everyone understands what it has achieved since you founded it, as well as give a shout out to what you're currently doing. So if I'm not mistaken, weren't they just purchased again in a private transaction for just under 5 billion?
Yeah, 4.7 billion, exactly. Private equity fund purchase. It's the second time or the third time that a private equity fund has bought them.
Yeah. So I mean, you've created something magnanimous. I mean, that's incredible. Not very many people get to say that this seed I planted really turned into an oak tree.
Yeah, but as Ray Norda used to say, Ray was at Novell. He used to say, "Finders keepers, founders weepers." If you actually follow the money and you look at, okay, all the people that put in all the sweat equity in the early years, got it to profitability, turned it into the world's leading genealogy company, versus the people that came in later when all the risk was gone, when it was profitable, and then they just kind of used it as a financial, vehicle to generate revenue for themselves and stock options and ownership for themselves. It's not a very pretty picture, actually. It's extremely weighted towards, those who came in later. So I'm really proud of what Ancestry's accomplished. Tens of billions of records, helped over probably 100 million people discover their family history. But I certainly have a lot of regrets about mistakes we made along the way. I was bought out in 2006 by the private equity fund that bought the whole company. And then the company went public in 2009. And of the 20 people that were on the NASDAQ or NYSE, I think NASDAQ podium, only one of them was somebody that I knew from the early days. So
wow, that's
missing out on your own IPO is not something I recommend.
I totally get it. Yeah, I wanted to dive more into that story. Okay, so tell us really quickly about SOAR so that we know what you're working on right now too.
Yeah, so actually SOAR has a mission to create the world's largest audio collection of meaningful content. So it might sound a lot like Infobase's 30 years ago. Well, it is. It's in a world where billions of people have smartphones. You should be able to search for anything that you care about and have it instantly retrieved on your smartphone. But as the world shifts from screen-based computing to AI voice-assisted computing with our Siris and our Alexas and our Googles, we want to be on the forefront. So what we've done is we've built a mobile app and smart speaker technology that will allow humans to have near perfect recall of all the content that matters to them. So for example, you're recording this on Zoom right now. I've been recording all my Zoom calls for about 3 months. Within an hour or two after a Zoom call is finished, Zoom has a recording of it and then a transcript of it. Well, what we do with our SOAR audio platform is we take that transcript, we index it, put it on your smartphone, and also make it retrievable on your Alexa and your Google. So for example, I might be able to say, in an hour or two, Alexa, what did Jesse Randall say about Colorado? Or what did Jesse Randall
Here's
say?
something I found on the web.
What did Jesse Randall say on Zoom about Colorado? And all of a sudden it will play the 1-minute clip from our, pre-webinar chat. So family content, faith content, company content, educational content. If you think about every college course that was taught on Zoom this year, humanity has transmitted and digitally recorded more knowledge in 1 year than in all of human history combined. What are we going to do with that? We want to slice it up, index it, put it on your smartphones, give everybody access to the library collections that they want, including their own content that just streams into this device. So everything you record is now preserved for future recall.
That's incredible. I love that pitch. I mean, especially this last year, right? So much recorded content that's out there. It would seem prudent that, a partnership with Zoom would probably become very, could be a great thing, right? To help get all that information out there. I mean, of course, there's all kinds of.
Well, we have a nice intro to the head of education at Zoom. She's a friend of my nephew's, and my nephew runs an organization around technology and education, and he has about 25,000 members that belong to his nonprofit, that support his nonprofit. So we're taking a few hundred hours of audio recordings from his annual conferences, and we're putting it into our platform. And then his friend at Zoom, who is a supporter of this nonprofit, is going to, see the demo and see what's possible when you take all the content from a conference. I mean, when you go to conferences, I've been going to conferences for 25 plus years, and incredible things are shared at conferences to tiny audiences of 50 people or 200 people. And that's some of the most important knowledge that exists on the planet. And if you can capture all the audio from all the sessions and make it available to all the attendees and those who didn't come, you now have kind of created a curated collection of really valuable, timely knowledge, and have instant access on mobile and voice. So yeah, we do get excited about this because the possibilities are limitless.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I love it. Well, clearly your background has fed its way all the way up to this moment to be able to tackle this.
I think that's nice when you look backwards and realize that this connected to this, connected to this. And if it hadn't been for kind of me exiting Ancestry, I never would have built Facebook apps, never would have joined Gallup and spent 5 years in Washington, D.C., and really never would have launched the SOAR platform the way we're doing it right now. It really did take a series of unfortunate events to get you to the spot where, hey, now we're positioned to do some really important things. I recruited my original Ancestry engineer. He's our lead architect. And so, a couple other people from Ancestry have been involved. So it is fun, to realize you get older, but the opportunities continue to present themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fantastic. Cool. Well, let's loop back and talk more about Ancestry. I mean, like the early days of creating something like that. I guess maybe, so I don't know this whole story. So I'm excited to dig into this because I think I probably have some, misconceptions about how hard it was to get this thing rolling. I mean, I look at it and just stereotypically think, well, who's going to back a company that wants to do genealogy?
Nobody wanted to.
Right. Well, so I want to know this, right? But I mean, your comment earlier about cash flowing to a positive position, I want to understand what happened. I mean, so you came back from this conference and you said, we can do this. I mean, what happened from there?
Yeah. So we knew that CD-ROM business was going to kind of go away, or that we didn't want to make that our focus. And so we launched Ancestry.com's original website in June of 1996. And it had 55 million records from the Social Security Death Index. We bought a $2,800 magnetic tape that had all these records on it. And this is a really good starting point for genealogists. If you can find your parents or grandparents in the Social Security Death Index, it starts to give you clues about their birth date, location, and it's a good starting point. So that was the first data set that we put up. Then we put up some message board archives from a nonprofit called Roots. And so, and then we started putting up new data sets every day. But for 10 months, we had zero revenue from Ancestry.com. And we hired a consulting firm called the George S. May Company. My partner and I were young. We were about 30. We really hadn't done business for very long, and we didn't really know what we were doing. So we thought, hey, let's hire a consultant. So the George S. May Company comes in and analyzes our cash flow, our losses, and basically told us, you guys are not a going concern. You might as well pull the plug. There's no way that you will survive as a company. And my partner and I, what we ended up doing is selling our interest in the in the CD-ROM publishing business, and we put $400,000 of our own money into Ancestry, and we just gutted it out. We just, 10 months of building databases, putting them online, paying for hosting, getting a big audience, but having zero revenue. So it was April 17th, 1997, that we first offered a paid subscription for $49.95 for a full year, unlimited access to all of our databases. And the value proposition gets better every day because every day we add at least one new genealogical database. So like Netflix or Hulu, where there's constantly new content coming in, that's why everyone subscribes. Spotify, all these subscriptions, it's not just the old library that you want, it's all the new stuff that you want. So we had a beautiful formula of, at the time we launched the paid subscription, we had 110 million records from a couple hundred databases, different states, different counties, a few different countries. And we added one new database at least every day. And on the first day, we got 55 subscribers at $49.95. And that was $2,500 of cash. After 10 months of no revenue, $2,500, we started forecasting like, hey, we could survive. If we could do $2,500 a day, that'll pay for our staff. That'll really be a great start. Yeah. And the cool thing is it never dropped below 55 subscribers. It got to 100 a day, then 200 a day. Pretty soon it was 1,000 a day. So we had the right product at the right time. Our free, one of the most important things we ever did was that new database that we put up every day. It was free for 10 days for anyone in the world. You didn't have to put in a credit card. There was no trial or anything. Every database of the day was free for 10 days. And then we would email everybody on our mailing list. We grew our mailing list to millions of genealogists. So every day they were eagerly waiting. What's the new database of the day? Because maybe my ancestor's in it. And after 10 days of free access, it would go behind the paid wall. Well, if you know genealogy, it's like a never-ending puzzle. If you're searching in Massachusetts birth records right now or Massachusetts death records, you can't get it all in 10 days because a month later, you're back in Massachusetts on a different line. So that formula of new data every day, an email to millions of people, and then it went behind the paid wall in 10 days was an incredibly successful formula for growing our subscription base.
Yeah.
Now, our churn rate was incredibly low. By about 2000, we studied our churn rate. And if someone subscribed for a year, 72% of our subscribers renewed for the second year. But after the second year, it was 92% renewal, 94% renewal. It was like, if someone's into genealogy, they're in it for the next 10 or 20 years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, okay, so you just blew my mind. You're doing all these things before like any of this stuff was documented for internet software companies. I mean, no one was talking about churn rates and subscriptions and all this stuff back in 97. I mean, this was all brand new. This is incredible to me. Okay, so tell me, I mean, that moment when that consulting firm came in, I mean, you invested probably a pretty penny to have them come in and help you. And they ended up basically, saying, hey, you're a horse with a broken leg. You just need to put this thing out of its misery. What did that feel like? That must have been horrible.
Oh, it was not only horrible, but they talked to every one of our employees because we wanted them to kind of help us with a financial plan, an operating plan, and an HR plan going forward. Well, they soured most of our employees on the fact that we weren't going to be viable. And then what they really wanted was us to write them a much bigger check to solve the problem. Well, they had just exacerbated the problem. Okay, the worst part of George S. May's consulting engagement was when they came up with an alternative business model. So we hadn't launched the subscription model yet. Disney and others were doing an advertising model. USA Today had tried a subscription model, switched to an advertising model. I don't remember what was going on exactly with which companies, but the George S. May company said, they said, genealogists know more about their relatives than anybody else, and data is extremely valuable. So if you get the genealogist to tell you data about all their relatives, you can sell that data and you can become the TRW of non-financial data. And you know what? We fired them on that day and said, we are not going to exploit genealogists' knowledge about their family. We are here to connect and strengthen families, not to exploit one member of the family. And that was the end of our relationship with George S. May. Now, 2 weeks later, it's the weirdest thing. I had a dream that we had not just built genealogy website, but in my dream, our company had created an intranet. Back in the 90s, that was a thing. Every company had a network server, Novell or 3Com or something. And then you had file folders being shared. So every company had an intranet. And in my dream, we built an intranet for every family in the world, which meant extended family members could share files, photos, chat with each other across the internet. And I woke up and I thought, that's it. That's how we're going to raise venture capital. Because literally 0 people were interested in investing in Sand Hill Road. We did a trip to the Bay Area. Nobody's interested. We did get a little bit of angel support from Utah because there's a genealogical interest in Utah. But outside of Utah, there was no interest. But after I had that dream, I started looking at domain names. We looked at heyfamily.com, dearfamily.com. Like, what's a good family domain name? And my partner found that we could buy myfamily.com from a domain squatter for $18,000. So we bought it. And in 6 months, we had 4 employees build intranet software, kind of the first social network for families. As soon as people in Silicon Valley heard about it, we raised $13 million before it launched, 30 million the next year, and 35 million the next year, all because of myfamily.com. The Ancestry business was just something they're like, oh, okay, that's nice. You can keep that too. But all the funding came because of that idea from that dream.
All right, you're blowing my mind here. This is awesome. Oh my goodness. That consulting thing makes my blood boil. I have a thing against consultants and startups and whatever else anyways. But I mean, the fact that you didn't let that, I guess, take you out. I mean, that is such a disheartening thing to have someone that you believe is credible enough to come in and help you, only to tell you that you're not viable. And then you needing to turn around and re-energize your employees and, and continue the company. That's, I mean, I don't mean to like get on a soapbox here, but I mean, that's a tough situation. You're amazing.
Well, no, I'm not amazing, but I think when you have a why, when you have a purpose, for us, this was not just a business moneymaker. This was like, hey, this needs to happen. The world needs access to all of the genealogical records. And by the way, every family in the world should be connected to each other across the internet. Like, those became a mission and a calling, not just a business opportunity. And so when you have a why, then you can kind of get through any obstacle. I don't know how we did it. Sometimes it was like almost hopeless, but to have a dream like that and then to start sharing that idea and having people say, oh, that's great. Now, I had a ton of people telling me, you can't do 2 things. You can't do ancestry.com and you can't do myfamily.com. That's ridiculous. Well, one of my heroes, as I think about the world of entrepreneurship, is Walt Disney, who had his animation business and it was on the ropes in the 1950s. And the same year he launched Walt Disney Amusement Park and did television. And everyone said he was crazy to do 3 things when his first business was hardly going to survive. Well, it turns out that the synergy between his 3 ventures, the fact that all the viewers of his television program would then watch the movies or want to go to the amusement park, the fact that the amusement park leveraged the intellectual property of all of his movies. I mean, it was the 3-pronged approach, and that created a flywheel that has worked till this day. So I think experts or so-called, experts who give advice to entrepreneurs, it's based on your experience or based on what you've seen, but there's always a new path forward. So I think it's, I like to do 2 things at the same time that have this kind of synergy behind the scenes. And I feel like you end up so much more strong than if you're just focused on one. So that's my personal opinion, but other people are going to be more successful if they just focus on doing one thing really, really well and scaling it.
Yeah, well, and that's ultimately where it comes down to, you as the founder sitting in the driver's seat, having absorbed all this information and data about your market, your customers, the problem that you're solving. I mean, you are the ultimate expert in what you're doing. And so it's your brain that has to put it together. Anyone else that comes in is only going to have, this snippet and that snippet, and they're not going to be able to use that intuition the way that you can.
Well, thankfully, I lived in Provo in 1995, and I bought a satellite PC, one of those Hughes direct PC satellite, and I had high-speed internet in 95. And after my kids would go to bed, I would often stay up till 2 or 3 in the morning trying to find what are people doing on the internet, marketing, business models, funding. And so I basically had hundreds of hours of high-speed internet learning what everybody else was doing, because it really was super early days. And, there weren't a lot of people doing a subscription model. There weren't a lot of people doing, back then, there wasn't really SEO or even pay-per-click. I remember when pay-per-click started, Ancestry was the largest keyword buyer in the United States on GoTo.com, which was later acquired by Yahoo, and then Google violated their patent on pay-per-click advertising and had to pay $350 million. But GoTo.com, their head of quality, saw our bid for 150,000 keywords. And she got on the phone and said, "We can't do that. That's more keywords than we've ever sold before." And I said, "Wait a second, can I talk to your supervisor?" So they got us to the supervisor, who actually was a genealogist. And when I explained that if you do a search for your own surname, you really want to be able to find it. And the rarer the surname, the more accurate the results are going to be. So you have to give us the long tail. You can't just give us 100 popular surnames. You have to give us the obscure names, because anyway, we ended up bidding successfully on 35,000 surnames at 2 cents a click. And we calculated later that year that it had made about $300,000 in profit for us in the first year.
Long tail search before it was a thing. I love it. All right, this is incredible. Okay, so I want to examine this period of time just a little bit more, between the time that you decided to start this and the time that you created the family intranet that ended up getting you funding. So you sold your interest in the CD-ROM business that you ended up doubling down and putting that into the company. I mean, that's also a very big move. Like I can appreciate how much it takes to be able to move money from one venture to another. So how long did it take from that point when you doubled down until you really started generating revenue and getting this outside validation that helped to fund the business? What was that time period like?
I think it was 10
that between
months.
Like 95 and 97?
So 96 is when we launched the genealogy website, and I started putting all my attention into that versus the CD-ROM business. In January 1st of 1997, we actually bought the Ancestry print publishing company in Salt Lake City that had been around for 14 years. They had been through a bankruptcy. They were a reference book and magazine publisher in the genealogy space. And they actually owned the .com domain, but they had never launched it. So we made an acquisition, and then we started putting a ton of data on the website. And so, it's hard to recall the details of exactly
it's been a while.
how many months of excruciating pain there was, because once we got cash flow positive and once we launched myfamily.com, then we had a different problem. We had unlimited funding being thrown at us by VCs who were saying, spend it, spend it, spend it, push on the gas, go big. And I brought in my brother to be the CEO of the company, because he came from the Folio search engine world. And so he brought in a bunch of his expert search engine technologists. So by 98, mid 98 to late 98, he was now running the company. And after we raised our first, 40 million, the venture capitalists wanted to replace him because he had never taken a company public before. So they brought in a CEO and a CFO from the Valley. I moved to San Francisco area in 1998 on May 30th. And And so then it was just a totally different set of problems, and everything looked rosy. We thought we were going to have a $1 billion IPO in early 2000. Merrill Lynch, I don't know if you know, Henry Blodgett was a really famous analyst at Merrill Lynch. He took a red-eye flight from New York, came and met with us, and jumped on a plane as soon as he finished meeting with us. And we were talking to Goldman Sachs, DFJ, Merrill Lynch, Morgan Stanley, and we chose Merrill Lynch. We wrote our S1, and we were going to be $1 billion company with a first day pop of 50%. They predicted we would be worth 1.5 billion. And then before the IPO, our new CEO and CFO decided to delay it by a few months so that they could wrap their head around the business. And then the window closed, and then it got really ugly. We had a really ugly 2000 and 2001, and the company barely survived that. It took a syndicate of Utah investors putting together a $15 million Series E funding round led by Paul Ahlstrom from VSpring and Dave Moon from SNet, and several other key investors. Jim Sorensen invested a lot of money. And it was that 2001 financing that allowed the company to take back control. Utah's board of directors shut down the San Francisco office, cut our expenses. I was VP of marketing, and we got to cash flow positive the second time in August of 2002. And then the company was profitable for 14 straight years after that.
Okay. Wow. So it sounds like you could have written your own version of The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
I think so. I think so. I have read that, and I do think the Ancestry story is worthy of a book. One of the things that bothered me in 2015 or whatever is when a private equity fund bought Ancestry and put $1 billion of debt on its balance sheet. And all of a sudden, after like 14 years of profits, the company was losing tens of millions of dollars a quarter or a year and couldn't make its interest payments. So they did a cost cutting, a downsizing, and they dropped 7 or 8 important products and properties. They shut down myfamily.com after 17 years. And my wife and her 7 sisters had 88,000 messages that they had shared with each other, including, 17 years of photos, all the recipes. I mean, that's a priceless collection of 17 years of family history. Pull the plug, nuked it all.
Oh, God.
And that's because of the debt that a private equity fund put on their balance sheet.
Yeah, my goodness. That is tragic. We've lost some things, with kind of emerging networks that came out over the years. Nothing that ingrained, though. I mean, that is horrible. So you were in it until kind of wrap up the Ancestry story from your perspective. So you were there until 2006.
I was there till 2002. I left the company, started another business. In 2006, the private equity fund bought my shares. So I was a shareholder until 2006. Okay,
gotcha. Well, in any regard, I know you haven't been involved in this for almost 20 years, but I mean, what a wonderful thing to build, I mean, to go against all the odds and establish a business in a place that no one wanted to talk about. I mean, I've got to hand it to you, like the ability to look and understand. I don't want to use the wrong verbiage here, but I mean, every genealogical researcher I've ever known is so obsessed with finding that data. I mean, cult is the wrong word, right? But I mean, that strong feeling, right, of just any new data is so powerful, and the ability to seen into that, right, and understood how powerful that was and set up that business model that you described, right, to give them a taste, effectively freemium, right, in 1997, give them a taste and then let them come in. I mean, I find that all to be just fascinating that you were able to put that together.
Well, when I was 12, the miniseries Roots came out. It was created by Alex Haley. He wrote the book Roots, and that miniseries was watched by 110 or 120 million households in 1977.
Wow.
And he understood that humanity he called it a deep hunger, marrow deep, to know our heritage, to know our stories, to know who you are and where you came from. So that's this universal thing. So obviously I get no credit for any of that, just that the fact that humans care about who our ancestors were and what we inherited from them, that's just a universal thing. And we were in the right place at the right time with a technology team that did search engines. And, we shifted from CD-ROM to the web. and we shifted from all best books to genealogy records. So it was just good timing, and with the support of great employees and incredible experts in the field, it was a team effort for sure. And a lot of credit goes to John Sittner, who founded Ancestry, the book publishing company in Salt Lake City. Lou Zukes, who used to work for him. We worked with Lou Zukes for a long time. There's just so many people that have built this company and this industry. And it's fun that it's located in Utah and having a worldwide reach.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, to divulge, I am over family history in my church responsibilities. And I have so many people that just, they live on Ancestry every day. And it just makes them so happy to be able to dig in and recreate that past that's there. So you've created something incredibly valuable that's obviously touched hundreds of millions of lives. So just in the last couple of minutes, I want to give it to you and, reflecting on your experience as a founder. You've done this a lot of times. Speaking to the entrepreneurs that are on the fence or maybe in the trenches thinking about doing this, what would you want them to know in order to get through this really tough period of starting, back of napkin until you really start getting outside financial support?
Yeah, I would say start with a meaningful why. I talk to entrepreneurs from all over the world. Mission-driven entrepreneurs are so exciting to me because they want to solve poverty, or they want to end homelessness, or they just want to create efficiency in a marketplace that's not efficient. But if it's a dear interest to them, then, as I said, I think you can almost overcome any obstacles along the way. The second thing I would say is there are always people who are willing to help because your story and your dream is going to resonate with them. You could go get rejected by 200 funders, and the 201st could write a check that would make all the difference. Or you could get customer after customer after customer saying no, and you just need one to say yes, and it opens up a whole new branch of revenue for you. So I think looking for the helpers, because any good why is going to attract a lot of helpers. I mean, the Ancestry thing did attract a number of very important people, but the My Family thing was an idea that resonated with literally every investor. My brother used to go to New York investor conferences talking about family, your parents. How often do they hear from you? Do you send them photos? How about your grandparents? Or is anyone in a rest home? We would play videos of grandparents in a rest home, logging into myfamily.com, getting tears in their eyes because they're seeing photos from their grandkids. Okay, there were hardly dry eyes in this group of suited up Wall Street executives. Okay, so I mean, find a cause or a purpose that's really meaningful. There's a lot of good companies that are needed to uplift people and to give people hope, to give people more economic benefits, more health. We have an obesity epidemic. We have all kinds of problems, climate, all these things. And if you have a good cause, you'll overcome obstacles, but you'll find helpers when you need them. I do want to end with one story. So after losing control of Ancestry, I was angry and bitter big time, like extremely angry. And I felt like I hated the venture capitalists or insiders who had, imposed terms on us, or I was just ignorant. I didn't know what the terms meant. And so I kept thinking, how could this happen? This was a good company. How could I lose control of it? How could you take it away from me? That's how I felt in 2001. I was really angry. Paul Alstrom once said to me, "Hey, Paul, you sound like a little kid playing soccer who's going to pick up his ball and go home. Could you just grow up?" That's what he told me. And that was good advice. But a couple months later, I was reading in the New Testament, and I was getting ready for a conference of my church. And it was a Saturday morning. And I opened up the scriptures to 1 Corinthians 3. And in it, my mom named me Paul, I like that name, but Paul, the apostle, wrote an epistle. And in it, he said, hey, there's arguing in the church. There's fighting in the church. There shouldn't be. He said, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. Therefore, he that planted is not anything, neither he that watered, but God that gave the increase. So my final invitation for all entrepreneurs is to acknowledge, look, there's a higher source of power out there. Somebody gave you breath. Somebody gives you life. Somebody sustains it. If you have an idea, it came from a higher source. If you have helpers, they are probably, being brought to you when you need them by a higher power. So if you acknowledge that and then look for like external help. So what happened to me when I read that verse is I realized Ancestry was never mine. My family was never mine. They were all gifts, and I was a temporary steward for it. Why should I be angry that I lost control of my company? And so if he that plants is nothing and he that waters is nothing, but God that gives the increase is everything, then that shaped my perspective. My anger completely disappeared. I now look back and realize, hey, all the investors were trying to do what they were supposed to do for their limited partners. Everybody was under stress. I don't hold a grudge against anybody for, the actions they took. And my perspective is much different than it was before, where I was like greedily saying, how could this happen to my company? Now I think I'm a little bit wiser about, who's behind everything.
That's a wonderful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that that really ties back well to the why that you just described so well, right? Because if your why is rooted in the right part of you, then it really will transcend beyond thinking something is mine, right? And that I need the benefit and the recognition and whatever else might motivate us at kind of a shallow level. But if you can get down below that, right, that's what will really carry you through the tough times and will really allow you to create something that's bigger than you. I love it. Well, Paul, thanks so much for spending time with us today. You're a fantastic entrepreneur. Obviously, you bring so much wisdom to the table, and I wish you the best as you continue building SOAR. You've got a huge opportunity in front of you, and there's so much more that's coming from that. I can't wait to continue to watch you make progress and see you impact lives. That certainly, this is a technology that can transcend generations as well.
Well, I hope so. Thanks, Jesse, for this wonderful chat. I appreciate you reaching out to me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, thanks, Paul.